Alright everyone, put on your drunk dar and watch the link in the description. It's a video of Nancy Pelosi, actually. She's giving a brief quip. I actually do not believe that she's drunk here. She does not actually seem intoxicated. It's not actually the case. Now what she seems is demented, which she's probably had for some time. I think that at this point Nancy Pelosi is basically propped up by chems. So she's going to that secret pharmacy in D.C. where you can't see the receipts, so to speak, about what the politicians are taking. I'm sure that erectile dysfunction pills are very common. You know, Mitch McConnell, when he wants to do his squeaky turtle sex, you know, he needs a little bit of help. He probably also needs painkillers at this point because he keeps injuring himself. Nancy Pelosi is demented. She's clearly got dementia. This has become a significant problem. I do not believe in term limits for people in Congress, for example. I'm in the minority when I say this, by the way. I understand, but let me qualify that. I think that people should simply stop voting for people that are massively geriatric and clearly out to lunch. Look at Strom Thurmond, for example, back in the day. Wasn't he 100 goddamn years old or something like that? He was at least in his 80s. He would sit there, and he would have a staffer, you know, sign off, you know, on the bills and stuff like that. Towards the end, he was not even self-aware. That doesn't mean that it wasn't the people's responsibility from his state voting for him to keep him in office. If the people of California are crazy enough to not primary out Nancy Pelosi, replace her with somebody who is still, you know, mentally able to understand what they're fucking doing, ultimately it's their responsibility. Does it negatively impact the nation? Yes, potentially. If you are a representative or a senator, if you're in Congress, representatives represent a district. The voters of that district have to vote their conscience and do what is right. If you are a senator, you represent a state. People of the state fundamentally are responsible for putting you in Congress. I realize that this is slightly anti-pragmatic in some senses, because these people also vote on things that affect the general public outside of their district, outside of their state. But the fact is that applying term limits is unnecessary. You have some people, for example, they enter Congress at a fairly young age. It should be an age test or a cognitive test more than term limits. They enter Congress, let's say they're 40 years old. They can reasonably be assumed to maintain that office for 20, 30 years without any real problems. So therefore, I don't believe in term limits for members of Congress. Once they get to a certain age, or once they are clearly in cognitive decline, I would simply apply to the people of the district or the state and say, look, you know, what the hell are you doing? I'm hoping that Nancy Pelosi gets seriously primaried and gets kicked aside. She can go sundown with Joe Biden. They can go biking together. Well, at this point, I don't think she's capable of biking. Biden's in better physical condition than she is. That's going some. He's fallen down like a dozen times in the last few years. Nancy Pelosi, meanwhile, when she kneels on the floor for the BLM anthem, she can't even stand up on her own. She has to be helped to the fucking, stand and stuff like that. It's a big problem. The problem is there's no easy solution. I mean, on one hand, you could base it on age, for example. Here's why there's no easy solution. You could base it on age, but there are people that are 90 years old that are still totally with it, and there are people that are 65 who have dementia. So using age doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. You could impose term limits. But let's say that someone enters Congress and they're relatively young. Maybe they're in their fucking 30s. Do you really want to limit them if they're doing a good job? You know, like for instance, Anna Luna imposed term limits. She's my age. She could feasibly remain in Congress for the next 30 years without any cognitive issues whatsoever. Do you really want to limit her, like say, well, you can only have like 4 congressional terms or something like that? Also, what if they bounce back and forth between the 2 chambers of Congress? Oftentimes, when a senator is departing, a representative replaces them. Sometimes vice versa, but not very commonly, because the Senate is considered a little bit more high class than the House of Representatives. So, let's say you get someone. You've imposed term limits. Let's say you get 4 congressional terms. They're in the House of Representatives for 8 years. They say, okay, well now I'm taking up this empty Senate seat. Now let's say you've given senators a 2-term limit. So now they spend 12 years in the Senate. Now they're old, probably. At the very least, they're in their 50s, even if they entered Congress when they were only in their 30s. So they're a fucking millennial or something. Now they run for the presidency. They get 2 more terms. Well, now they're in their 60s. Maybe they decide to try to become a judge. Maybe they get appointed to that. So, I mean, it's a non-solution, really. Basing it on age doesn't make sense. Basing it on term limits doesn't make sense. That leaves only, in my opinion, one viable option: cognitive testing. And this would have to be by a full medical panel. The American people should know what pills and capsules and everything that members of Congress are on. That way they can make a more informed decision with regards to whether they want to keep them in Congress. Now, some of it is very visible. You can see, for example, Joe Biden quite clearly was displaying signs of dementia and confusion at the presidential debate. Nancy Pelosi is clearly displaying them here. I don't think that she's loaded, although she frequently is. In this case, I think it's just her cognitive state in general. That's one part of it. But we also need to know, what kind of pills are you taking? What kind of infusions are you using in your body? I mean, mostly it's adrenochrome, I suppose, especially among the Democrats, unipartists in general. I'm sure that Mitch McConnell got his infusion today. If we knew what kind of medicines they were on, we could tell who was demented, because they'd probably be taking dementia medication. You know, the reason why they won't do that is some of these medicines are off-label, marketed by the CIA and stuff like that. Oh, you know, you've got a prescription for cocaine and adrenochrome? I'm sure that you're not fucked up in any way, shape, or form. That's the reason why. That would be my suggestion anyway. I don't believe in term limits. I think that's a bad idea. And it can't solely be based on age, because again, a person might be 90 years old and fully cognizant. They know totally well where they are. They know their name. They know what date it is. Hell, maybe they're massively intelligent. They have a better memory than me. A person could also be 60 years old and starting to mentally decline. It can happen. It's not necessarily common. It tends to come with greater and greater age, but it is possible for that to happen. So I would recommend independent cognitive testing. There would have to be a panel involved. We would have to look at the medications that the politicians are taking. And I have a feeling, if the American public knew what pills members of Congress were taking, they'd kick half of Congress out and there'd be non-incumbency. You'd find fucking dick pills. You'd find dementia pills, painkillers, pretty much everything under the sun. All we need is public disclosure. We can make our decisions for ourselves. That's about all. Peace out.